I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd get the cops called on me for fixing something, but that's exactly what happened. Picture this. I'm kneeling by a broken dock, wrench in hand, the sun just beginning to set across the water, when two officers stroll down the Marina pier like they're about to bust some hardened criminal. And the person who called them? My very own HOA president. She stood on the shore with her arms crossed, lips pursed, smirking like she'd just caught me red-handed. The thing is, what she didn't know, what none of them knew, is that the entire marina belonged to me. Every dock, every slip, every plank of weathered wood. And that secret was about to change everything. Let me back up. My name's Daniel, and for the better part of the last 10 years, I've lived in what I used to think was paradise. A quiet waterfront community with neat pastel houses, tidy lawns, and rows of boats rocking gently in the current. When I first moved here, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Early retirement dreams, peaceful fishing mornings, neighbors who waved when you passed by. What could go wrong? Well, one thing, and it's the three most cursed letters in suburban America: HOA. Our HOA president, a woman named Linda, was the kind of person who could suck the joy out of a summer barbecue. She had that permanent squint, like she was always looking for trouble. You know the type, clipboard in hand, patrolling lawns for grass that dared grow half an inch taller than regulation height. To her, rules weren't guidelines, they were gospel. And breaking them? A sin punishable by fines, letters, and public humiliation in monthly meetings. At first, I played along. I kept my hedges trimmed, paid my dues on time, even showed up for their potluck dinners, where everyone pretended to like Linda's soggy lasagna. But over the years, I noticed the docks starting to fall apart, boards warped and splintered, nails jutting out like rusty teeth, even entire sections sagging dangerously close to collapse. I wasn't just annoyed, I was worried. Kids played on those docks. Elderly neighbors leaned on the rails. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. So one Saturday morning, I grabbed my toolbox and headed down. I figured I'd tighten a few bolts, replace a couple planks, and make the dock safe again. I wasn't charging anyone. I wasn't making a fuss. I was just trying to be helpful. But apparently, in Linda's twisted HOA kingdom, being helpful was a crime. I'll never forget her voice screeching across the water. "Daniel, you can't touch that dock. That's HOA property." I stood there with a screwdriver in hand, sweat dripping down my back, staring at her in disbelief. "Linda," I said, "the dock is broken. Someone's going to get hurt." But she wouldn't listen. Instead, she pulled out her phone, pressed a button with dramatic flair, and announced, "I'm calling the cops." That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so unbelievably ridiculous. Who calls the police on a neighbor for tightening a few screws? Still, I put my tools down, folded my arms, and waited. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, 2 officers arrived, walking down the dock as if they were about to confront a trespasser. Now here's where things get interesting. The officers asked me what I was doing, and I explained calmly. I live here. The dock was broken. I was fixing it. They turned to Linda, who went on a rant about property rights and unauthorized repairs and violating HOA bylaws. And the whole time, I just stood there, biting my tongue, hiding the one fact that would turn her whole argument upside down. The dock, and the entire marina, was mine. I had bought it years ago, quietly, through a deal with the developer. The HOA thought they controlled it, but in reality, they'd been guests on my property the entire time, and soon they were going to find out. But before I could drop that bombshell, I decided to wait. See, revenge tastes better when it's slow-cooked. Instead of arguing, I let the cops do their thing. They shrugged, said it was a civil matter, and left. Linda glared at me like she'd just won a great victory. But inside, I was already planning something far bigger. Because if the HOA wanted a war over the marina, They were about to learn they'd picked the wrong enemy. And that's where the story really begins. The cops leaving wasn't the end, it was the spark. From that moment on, Linda doubled down on her petty crusade against me, and I started gathering every bit of leverage I had. What she didn't realize was that every threat, every fine, every smug remark was just fuel for the fire I was about to light under the entire HOA. And when it burned, oh, it was going to burn bright. The very next week, I got my first letter. A crisp, white envelope tucked neatly into my mailbox with the HOA logo stamped in bold. I opened it, already suspecting the contents, and sure enough, notice of violation. Apparently, repairing a dock without proper HOA approval was against community guidelines. They slapped me with a $200 fine. A fine for fixing something dangerous. My blood boiled, but instead of paying it, I pinned the letter to my fridge like a trophy, because every petty move they made was just more evidence of their absurdity. And trust me, Linda wasn't stopping at just one letter. The fine started rolling in like clockwork. 1 for improper tool storage, because I left my toolbox in view for an afternoon. Another for unsanctioned construction, because I replaced one warped plank on my back porch. My favorite, a $50 penalty for having a boat fender that was the wrong shade of blue. Who even notices that? Linda did, and she weaponized every rule in the book to make my life miserable. Neighbors began whispering. Some laughed behind closed doors. Others avoided me entirely, worried that being seen with me might earn them Linda's wrath. But a few, just a few, came up to me privately, nodding in quiet solidarity. They were tired of the nonsense, too. They just weren't bold enough to fight back. Yet. Now, I'm not the type to just roll over. The more she pushed, the more I pushed back, though always carefully, always legally. I documented everything. Every letter, every fine, every ridiculous accusation went into a neat binder I titled Linda's Greatest Hits. I took photos of the broken dock, the splintered boards, the sagging railings. I gathered witnesses. My plan wasn't just to win. I wanted to dismantle their entire argument piece by piece. But I had a secret advantage no one knew yet. Remember how I said I owned the Marina? That wasn't just a title. That was a deed, signed and recorded years ago, when the developer sold off and used parcels of community property. I'd bought the Marina dirt cheap, planning one day to renovate it. The HOA never noticed the paperwork, never updated their maps. As far as they were concerned, the Marina was theirs to control. As far as reality was concerned, they were my tenants. And tenants who didn't pay rent don't usually get to boss around the landlord. Things escalated fast. At the next HOA meeting, Linda brought up my violations, like she was prosecuting a criminal. I sat in the back, arms crossed, listening to her list my so-called offenses: unauthorized repairs, unsafe practices, noncompliance with Marina bylaws. Every word dripped with smug satisfaction. Finally, I raised my hand. "Linda," I said calmly, "you keep calling it your Marina, but it's not." The room went dead silent. Heads turned. Linda's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice wavering. "I mean," I said, pulling out a copy of the deed I'd brought with me, "this entire Marina belongs to me. Has for years." You could hear the collective gasp around the room. Some people leaned forward, others whispered to their neighbors. Linda's face went pale, then flushed crimson. She sputtered, That's impossible. The Marina is HOA property." "No," I corrected her, standing now so everyone could see the papers. "The HOA uses the Marina, but ownership, that's mine. And unless you've been paying rent, which you haven't, you're technically trespassing every time you set foot on those docks." The shockwave that rolled through the crowd was delicious. Some neighbors tried to hide their grins. Others looked like Christmas had come early. For years, they'd endured Linda's tyranny under the assumption she held all the cards. But now, the power balance had shifted. Linda tried to recover. She banged her gavel, insisting the meeting continue, claiming my documents were fake, that she'd look into it. But the damage was done. People were buzzing, questioning her authority for the first time. And the more she scrambled, the more desperate she looked. That night, I went home smiling. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, I'd only cracked the surface. If Linda wanted to keep pushing, I was going to push back harder. Because now I had leverage, and I was going to use it. Linda tried to recover. She banged her gavel, insisting the meeting continue, claiming my documents were fake, that she'd look into it. But the damage was done. People were buzzing, questioning her authority for the first time. And the more she scrambled, the more desperate she looked. That night, I went home smiling. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, I'd only cracked the surface. If Linda wanted to keep pushing, I was going to push back harder. Because now I had leverage, and I was going to use it. It was glorious. For the first time, she was the one sputtering, the one backpedaling. And the neighbors? Oh, they noticed. Quiet support turned into open chuckles. People started nodding to me in the street, whispering, "Good job." And, about time someone stood up to her. The tide was turning, and Linda knew it, which only made her fight harder. She tried calling an emergency meeting to strip me of community privileges. She pushed for a vote to increase fines specifically for Marina-related violations. She even threatened to sue me personally. But each time, I hit back with facts, paperwork, and a smile that drove her crazy. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was showing everyone just how powerless she really was. And trust me, the climax was still to come. Linda wasn't going down quietly. If anything, the more she realized the neighborhood was slipping out of her grasp, the more desperate she became. She tried to plaster notices all over the community boards, accusing me of endangering residents by repairing the docks without her approval. She even went door to door, knocking and gossiping like a politician on the campaign trail, trying to sway people back to her side. But here's the thing. Once people see weakness in a bully, their grip evaporates. The whispers grew louder, the chuckles turned into full-on laughter, and suddenly I was the one people looked to when they had questions about marina access, dock repairs, or even neighborhood issues. Linda wasn't the queen bee anymore. She was just loud, and I let her run herself ragged, because I knew exactly what was coming next. The HOA had its annual financial audit coming up, and as the marina owner, I had a direct interest in their waterfront expenditures. I requested the full breakdown of their budget, something every member technically had the right to see, though most never bothered. When the report landed in my hands, I nearly laughed out loud. Thousands of dollars spent on dock maintenance, but the dock hadn't been touched in years. Huge line items for marina upkeep. Yet I was the one paying out of pocket to fix rotting planks. It didn't take a forensic accountant to realize what was happening. Linda and her cronies had been funneling HOA funds into pet projects, labeling them as waterfront maintenance, and hoping no one would ever check. Oh, but I checked. The next meeting was the stuff of legends. Packed house, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, everyone buzzing because they heard whispers about what I'd found. Linda sat at the front with her little gavel, smug and ready to shut me down. "Any new business?" she asked, feigning boredom. I stood. "Yes. Let's talk about where our money has been going." And then I laid it all out. The bogus expenses, the non-existent repairs, the fact that the marina she claimed authority over wasn't even owned by the HOA. I handed out copies of the financial report, with my notes highlighted in bold red. Gasps filled the room, followed by murmurs, followed by outright outrage. Linda tried to shout me down, waving her gavel like it was a sword, but the damage was done. The neighbors saw the truth. The fallout was swift. A motion was made right then and there to remove Linda as HOA president. Hands shot up across the room. Yes, yes, yes. The vote wasn't even close. She went from smug ruler to disgraced ex-president in under 10 minutes. But here's the real kicker. With her ousted, the new leadership turned to me. Not to run the HOA. I had no interest in that headache, but to help oversee waterfront planning, since, I actually owned it. Suddenly, the same people who once whispered doubts were openly cheering me on, treating me like the community's quiet hero. And Linda, she stormed out of that meeting red-faced, sputtering the same way she had the day the cops realized the Marina was mine. Except this time, there was no recovering. Her reign was done. In the weeks that followed, things changed fast. The dock was properly repaired, with HOA funds this time, not my personal money. Marina access was streamlined, making life easier for boat owners and families. The neighbors, freed from Linda's constant nitpicking, started organizing community barbecues, fishing days, and even little sailing lessons for the kids. The whole neighborhood felt lighter, freer, like someone had lifted a weight off everyone's shoulders. And every time I walked down to the dock, I couldn't help but smile. Not because I had beaten Linda, but because I had shown everyone that bullies only win when no one stands up to them. Looking back, the whole ordeal feels almost surreal. 1 minute, I was just a guy fixing a dock. The next, I was standing up to a power-hungry HOA president with the entire neighborhood watching. And the lesson: never let someone convince you they have power over you when they don't. Facts, patience, and a little bit of petty persistence can topple even the loudest tyrant. So yeah, Linda called the cops on me for fixing a dock. She tried fines, threats, and smear campaigns. But in the end, it was her empire that crumbled, not mine. Because the Marina, it was never hers to begin with. Looking back, the whole ordeal feels almost surreal. 1 minute, I was just a guy fixing a dock. The next, I was standing up to a power-hungry HOA president with the entire neighborhood watching. And the lesson: never let someone convince you they have power over you when they don't. Facts, patience, and a little bit of petty persistence can topple even the loudest tyrant. So yeah, Linda called the cops on me for fixing a dock. She tried fines, threats, and smear campaigns. But in the end, it was her empire that crumbled, not mine. Because the Marina, it was never hers to begin with. So if you've ever dealt with a nightmare HOA, or had to fight back against unfair rules, I want to hear it. Drop your own story in the comments, because trust me, you're not alone. Every neighborhood has its Linda, the kind of person who thinks control equals respect. But stories like ours prove the opposite. When people come together, when truth and persistence win, the bully always ends up looking smaller than they ever wanted to admit. And honestly, hearing other people's stories makes these battles feel less isolating. When I was standing on that dock with the cops called on me, I felt humiliated, singled out. But today, retelling it, I feel proud. Proud that I didn't let it break me. Proud that I turned the tables. And proud that maybe, just maybe, someone listening right now will realize they're stronger than they think. So if you've ever dealt with a nightmare HOA, or had to fight back against unfair rules, I want to hear it. Drop your own story in the comments, because trust me, you're not alone. Every neighborhood has its Linda, the kind of person who thinks control equals respect. But stories like ours prove the opposite. When people come together, when truth and persistence win, the bully always ends up looking smaller than they ever wanted to admit. And honestly, hearing other people's stories makes these battles feel less isolating. When I was standing on that dock with the cops called on me, I felt humiliated, singled out. But today, retelling it, I feel proud. Proud that I didn't let it break me. Proud that I turned the tables. And proud that maybe, just maybe, someone listening right now will realize they're stronger than they think.